Take that and use it, okay?
Okay.
Never back down, never what?
Never give up.
Yeah, I want it louder though. Never back down, never what?
Never give up.
Never back down, never what?
Never give up.
Let's play! Let's go! Woo!
Hello nature viewers, thank you once again. I'm glad that you've come back to see another, which I've brought to you of course, Brady's National Geographic episode. And yes, just for the record, that right there was my daily, I can't really say that, that was my monthly dose of motivation, yeah. Because there's one thing that you gotta know about the aspect of life is you never back down and you never give up. Now, one of the main aspects on this series that we always do is, of course, just like, showing the aspects of life out there in the real world, like going outside to do something, or, just like analyze how beautiful the world truly is. Now, here's the thing though, even though that going outside, like for National Geographic, is true 50% of the time, the other 50% comes from, well, the name itself though. Let's think about this though. National, I like to view it as nature because, they both sound a little bit similar, whereas geographic is more like a way of saying geography. And that's one thing that we've never really seen to cover here. However, the way I'm going to go about this is because, I always got to make some new ideas for new episodes out there so that way I can keep this thing going. Just like with how we're making our bug series by starting with the strongest one, because like that's my way of changing things every now and then. We started with the wasps, which were, the strongest. And to me, I'm going to actually be talking about the continents, of course. And, well, I mean, the biggest one that there obviously is Asia. Because, not only is it the most important, at least, well, to their advantage. Even with how big and like, some countries tend to be like some of the greatest out there and, us, we kind of feel like, we're not doing as good. There's so many things behind them, as a backstory that haven't been covered and you kind of almost will wish that you never wanted these to be covered. But either way, you're probably going to learn about this, whether or not you're going into a history class next year. I mean, you will learn about this because that's the same way that I had to as well. I mean, this was very tragic. This was very sad. I do feel bad for like, the people that had to go through this, but at the end of the day, that's just what happened. Even throughout all the wars and like revolutions that included this country, I mean, like it's the biggest, so it kind of would be like impossible to not include them. I'm not saying I'm trying to stop. Now, if I keep taking the same rules that I applied to myself, of course, we took the strongest continent, which is, of course, Asia. Well, dividing that up, we have to take out the strongest country from there. I was about to say continent. And, the only other, like, strongest country we have is Russia. It's so big that it connects from one continent to the next. Literally, I think it takes up about, like, 25% of Europe or something like that. So, the three things I'm going to be discussing about Russia is the Russian Revolution, the uprise and fall of Stalin, and where we are at this given point. This should probably be a perfect episode, at least, for this time being. First, starting with the Russian Revolution. This took place before World War I happened. This at least was taking place before that happened, because by then, this was a period in time where Industrial Revolution was starting to, come to its rise, and many countries out there were getting this fully great use out of it. Engineering and, other mechanics were coming out there, and it was really improving everybody really well, except for Russia. That was the main thing, though. Despite being, like, one of the largest countries, I think, on Earth, their backstory has been, like, pretty rough over the times. Not a lot of people were getting fed properly, and the money wasn't put to good use. It was getting to waste, of course, but not everything was looking good, and this all happened because of King Nicholas, who just chose to do everything for himself and nobody else, and people hated him for how bad he was. And I'm not saying bad as in like a strict person who would probably like chop your head off. No, I'm saying bad as in like a person that just is so absolutely dumb. Like he just does these things because he thinks that this is actually gonna work, when like it is gonna work, but only for him specifically, nobody else. Like everybody hates him because they just wouldn't get anything that they want. They wouldn't get food, they wouldn't get wealth, they wouldn't get housing, clothes, literally anything though. This all happened because of one man who just chose to do things for nobody else but just him. Kind of reminds me of Trump sometimes. And the further this progressed with, King Nicholas choosing to make his dumb decisions as useful, the crowd only got fed up only more. And it came to the point where, he started sending the military out there to kill the civilians because they tried to attack him. But eventually, the military ended up taking the civilian side, and they started, getting around King Nicholas because he just wasn't making the right choices. And, like, that's understandable for the guards to do because, I mean, come on. If you really think about it, you can only kill a person, hold on, let me rephrase. Sometimes you can only kill somebody a limited amount of times in a video game before eventually, like, you know, you get fed up, or like, you know, you get tired of like killing the same person, and then you're like, all right, come on, this person does deserve a life. You know, if I were them and I were in this situation, I mean, I could understand what they're going for. I mean, I don't even like this guy either. This point in time was also where communism was starting to rise. So while all this was going on, Mr. Vladimir Lenin out there was actually reaching into the Communist Party and was fed up with the fact that, you know, he wasn't making the right decisions and everything. And like, you know, he really thought that he could like bring a rise to communism, which unfortunately he actually did. But, you know, I guess like the whole thing was that he actually was fed up with Nicholas for some reason, because he just like wasn't really pitching into the ideas that he wished he would have gotten. Or I mean, I guess Lenin wished that, you know, Nicholas would somehow hear him out and take the ideas that he had. I honestly forgot how it works. So, of course, to nobody's surprise, King Nicholas eventually did get kicked out, which was a celebration. And at first, they started chilling because Vladimir Lenin then took the spot. And, you know, he kind of was, I guess, like, part of the reason on why, you know, Nicholas ended up, like, you know, dying and, like, got kicked out and was no longer, you know, king or whatever. Which, honestly, I mean, he didn't deserve to be that in the first place. But everybody celebrated because they thought that Vladimir Lenin would finally, like, you know, do what they've always wanted, which was, you know, have more wealth, like, have more money, have more food, and like, you know, not be starving, have more clothes, and work on like a better way to improve Russia. But no, it was only just to find out that he was 10 times worse than Nicholas. And you could tell that that's bad, because like, you know, he was adding the strict part into that. Like, you know, he wasn't dumb. I mean, you know, the decisions he made were kind of dumb, but I mean, the fact was he was just like doing things for himself, but he was also punishing people who like wouldn't listen to him. And this again started the fuel of the crowd, or the civilians out there, which, you know, eventually would lead to his demise too. The funny thing that you gotta know about Lenin's demise is that he was kind of slowly starting to kill his own self without even knowing it. I'm serious, like, it came to the point where he couldn't even stand up straight. I think he had like something on his leg, and like, you know, he was hardly walking. He was sick and contaminated with a disease, and he was trying to push forward as much as he can, trying to control the civilians, even though that he knew that he was cooked because of how much like everybody was ganging up on him, and everybody was fighting and for anti-communism, even though that, you know, it isolated, and it doesn't become big as a problem, but it still is a little bit. But like, the main thing is that he also did meet Stalin, though. I should probably mention that he met Stalin, and he shared the whole plans of communism, and like, you know, what to use for it, how to use it, you know, what you shouldn't do with it, even though that you probably know how, like, you know, Stalin ended up using it, which we're gonna cover that too. But yeah, I mean, like, you know, he promised Stalin that he would hopefully use communism in the way that he wanted to, even though he wasn't using it good in the first place. And boom, he died. He dead. I need to drink some water because that took too much breath out of me. Oh, okay, that was really good. All right, moving on with Stalin and, you know, World War II. So as Lenin went down, Stalin only went up just to help replace and hopefully do something perfect, which definitely was not an achievement that he made anytime soon. Cause I mean, you know, you wouldn't even like believe like how he would act like during the thing that he made though. He literally created the gulag, which is where like he would send literally children out there to go suffer and die. Even though he looked innocent with his freaking big mustache that he had. I'm literally shocked by how curly and like how big his mustache looked. Even though he looked innocent with his little tiny smile, you could see like the amount of deep, dark hatred and, you know, anger that's inside of him right there, which is exactly how you describe a true villain. It was hard for Russian civilians in that time period to actually believe that their next leader, who was literally like bringing on this communism stuff, was actually about to almost like wipe out the whole entire population, or try to kill every last one of them that wasn't going to obey to the law, which, you know, is kind of hard to think about. And it's kind of sad to like, you know, see that really is what happens to many leaders out there. Like, they find out what they truly want and it's not really working out for them, but they can't do anything about it, even though that there are like some videos where I feel like they are kind of like forced out there to make it look like, oh, he's so wonderful, and, you know, if I don't say this, he's probably gonna shoot me in the head. But I literally saw a video back in the 1940s or whatever, where it was about Stalin's accomplishment, I think, in World War II, which is the reason why they avoid that, is because of the amount of significance that he did in World War II. But anyways, like I was saying, like the video was about like some lady who was like, thank you so much, Stalin, I love you, I love you, I love you. Like, oh my god, it looks like some like random like rom-com that you would just find at like some random like Disney Channel TV. Okay, let me settle down now. But yeah, Russia under Stalin was not any good. This literally, like, basically was the definition of how, like, politics in Russia wasn't making things any more better. As, like, once Vladimir Lenin came along and, like, his idea and spread of communism party, then that literally just drove the whole entire country of Russia insane. And, once again, the only reason why they avoid that part is because of the significance that was made in World War II. And many, think that he was a good guy for, stopping Germany from rising to absolute power. Because, once they partnered with Russia and they had their own army actually unite with the anti-communism, because they're like, we hate you guys, but we also hate Germany's rise in World War II. So fine, the communism, the Red Party and White Party, which kind of reminds me of Red Sox versus White Sox. I would really love to see a game like. Yeah, so with that, Stalin led with the Communist Party and the Anti-Communist Party, and both sides of Russia, the USSR, both teamed up to help fight against Germany in World War II, which of course worked out because Germany kind of stood no chance when they had the US coming at them from one end, and then they had the USSR coming at them from the other hand. Which even though that the US and the USSR, both still had rivalries as it went progressed. Like I think in the 80s is when it really started to go between both of them, because it's when they started planning nuclear attacks. The main thing that both of them tried to team up and fight against was fascism, because that was the main thing that had to get rid of first. They could get rid of each other all they want, but that was the main purpose right there. But besides that, even though they made one significance, it still doesn't change the fact that millions of people died in the gulag thanks to forced labor and, not obeying the law, even though that it kind of felt a little bit understandable if they didn't want to. Stalin, of course, like Lenin, could only do as much as he could before he eventually died, and led the last person who still remains here today, Vladimir Putin, which, as you could tell, actually took the name from Lenin. So, that should already tell you something right there, but I'm not going to express too much about that. But all I just will say is that, seeing that Russia is, calm right now, and it's not, trying to start any problems, and neither should we. We shouldn't, try to do anything. We shouldn't try to start any war here, okay? Always gotta recognize the amount of background detail from one of the biggest countries out there that has literally shaped the way it has been, mainly from the Communist Party in general. That is literally the biggest thing that has made them become what they are and what they probably are still going to be to this day. It's literally a life-changing event. Once it started, it was going to be stay like that forever. But that's just something, that's just something to help sit back, relax to, and maybe gain a little bit of knowledge though, because you always learn something new every single day, and you would probably never expect that stuff to come from Russia, but it still happened nonetheless. And it feels like a good spot to end the episode right now, because we're at a perfectly good runtime. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching today's episode of National Geographic, and this was very interesting. I hope you actually were able to gain a little bit of something extra, because while we also sit down here and talk about the style of nature, you also got to recognize the other things about the world. This is National Geographic right here, and besides, it actually opens up a whole new era for us. I've been able to go at least more than 50 videos by discussing all the nature things that are in the outside world. But with also talking about the outside world, you also got to talk about the amount of lands and history that comes with that, which is what opens up to the geographic part. So with making this new establishment and also the bug series and even planet documentaries, I don't think I'll ever run out of ideas again. Make sure to also subscribe to National Geographic Official, this channel, so we can make it grow more, because, it tends to be doing good at, a steady pace. Hopefully by the time, this video comes out, I can hopefully, we can hopefully start reaching to 300 subscribers, maybe not. Whatever. Follow our TikTok, because that's where all the shorts come in from, and follow the cameraman's Instagram. Why do you always want me to promote this thing? Just keep moving on. With that being said, I stuck at endings. It's also the last day of May too, so that's kind of a little bit interesting. But for everybody, it's probably already summer vacation, so it's not like it's really that big of a deal. But I will be looking forward to June, or I guess you could also say Pride Month in this case. And also, because it's summer, like I said, keep wearing your sunscreen. I'm telling you, you are going to need it. And if you don't have any, don't worry, because I can always hit you up. And you also better believe I am going to be watching my monthly dose of motivation on repeat tonight. Bye.